Jennings, who's head of surveying, and like I say, I can see there's a few questions that have come up. They might be answered. If they're not, we'll put them to Steve at the end of his show.
Sounds good.
Thank you, Steve.
No problem at all. Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. As mentioned, I'm Steve Jennings. I run the sales and surveying here at Evolve Home Energy Solutions. I've been with Evolve now for about 5 years or so, and I've worked like Kay has with Gary and Paul for Paul nearly 2 decades now, so long enough. But it's fun, and obviously we've been doing a lot of work in and around insulation and energy improvement measures for domestic dwellings and a few commercial dwellings as well. Since the summer of last year, we have been working very closely with the government and the Simple Energy Advice, and of course, trying to bring the Green Homes Grant to our clients and to help them to benefit from the measures that can be installed through that particular scheme. So what I'm going to talk to you through today is about the quotation process, the voucher process, the installation, and any red flags, anything that comes up that would be out of the ordinary and would ask a question or two about that installer. Like I say, we'll go through the roadmap, and we'll start here with the obtaining of a quotation. As Molly mentioned earlier, what you'll need is to make sure that your installer or your chosen installer is that of a Trustmark registered installer. Now, to be a Trustmark registered installer, that means that the measure you're planning to install, be that cavity wall, loft, external wall insulation, internal wall insulation, air source heat pump, must be regulated by a regulatory body, sometimes through Ofgem or through the BBA, through CUA, through SEGA, and you would need to be installing under those regulations. For us, we are PAS 2030-17 and PAS 2035-19, which basically means we can install cavity wall and loft insulation to the current regulations, and allows us to get a Trustmark registration number, thus allowing us to get a Green Homes Grant voucher. So to obtain a quote, you can go on the Simple Energy Advice website and the government website. I think the PQQ process is back on the Simple Energy Advice. I'm pretty sure you can go through now and you can actually build a plan. Once you've put information about your property into the Simple Energy Advice website, whether it's a 3-bedroom semi-detached house, gas central heating, what the loft installation is like, the age of build, it will recommend a series of measures that you could potentially have done under the Green Homes Grant. Sometimes it may not recommend the measure that you want, but that doesn't prohibit you from getting the funding. You'll then get a list of local installers, and if they're on that list, that means they are Trustmark approved. You can go on the Trustmark website. That will also indicate that they're Trustmark approved and give you a unique number for that particular installer. If you're happy with, you are actually, I should say at this moment, that you are encouraged to get multiple quotes. So you should look at 2 or 3 installers in your local area. Once you've looked at an installer and you're happy to get a quote from them, you would go through to an advisor that works on behalf of the installer. So in this case, your team advisor for Evolve will contact you and will do a desktop survey. The survey will indicate what measures can be installed, and they use various different methods to sort of get an idea of what the property is and what the measure can be done. And they use the EPC register, which will give an indication of whether the walls are empty and cavities are suitable to insulate, or if the loft needs topping up, or the heating system potentially. They'll use Zoopla or Rightmove for images, for sales data, which will again give indication of size of the property. And they can use Street View, Google or Apple, and look at the property and talk through with the customer, with the client, the property and the potential measures that can be installed. Once you know what measure you would like to have done, so for example, cavity wall insulation, a quotation can then be issued to you by our Your Home advisor. Once you have that quotation, it should come to you in a PDF format, and it should detail a number of things that are very key. First is the name and address of the installer. Also, the Trustmark registration number for the measure being installed by the installer. So you can have an installer that can claim to do cavity wall insulation and loft insulation, but they may not be registered for both. So it's important that you have registration numbers for each measure rather than just one for the installer. And that will be on that quotation. It will detail the labor hours and the materials that are going to be used to install the measure that you selected. And each measure will be in 2 different quotations. So you'll get one PDF for cavity wall and another PDF for a loft. If you choose a secondary measure as a result of having the primary measure installed, a secondary measure will be also delivered to you in a PDF format, again detailing the Trustmark registration numbers and the labor hours and materials to install the work. Once you have your quote, you are then able to send that. If you select that nominated installer, you will send that to the government website or the Green Homes Grant Services, and they will review the quotation given to you, just to make sure that the installer is again approved and a quality installer, and that the price is correct. If the price is extortionate, it will be sent back for clarification as to why it is so expensive. And likewise, if it is less than the average, it'll be sent back to clarify why it is so cheap. We would all like it if it was very cheap, wouldn't we? So once you have you've done that, and the Green Homes Grant Services are happy with the quotation you sent, they will then follow that with another email, which will give you a voucher. In an email format, the voucher will say who the installer is, the amount that you are eligible for, up to 5,000 or 10,000, depending on your eligibility. Of course, if it's a £5,000 grant, you will be issued 2/3 of the cost. And if it's a £10,000 grant, you'll be issued the value to the tune of 100%. The installer will also receive an email. That email will contain the voucher code that is given both to the installer and to the client. Once the installer has the email saying that you're happy to go ahead with us, we will then contact you and talk to you about the next process, which will be the survey stage. Some installers do flip this. They do the survey before the quotation, but we find, and it has been absolutely fine up until now, that a desktop survey is adequate before a survey is conducted. Now, a surveyor will come and visit the property to basically make sure that the property is viable for the measure selected for installation. So the surveyor will come to the property, they will check the cavities of the walls, or they'll check the loft, or they'll check whatever it is that is surrounding the measure installed. But one of the main key parts they're looking for is to make sure that if they're installing something, it's not at the detriment of something else. So for example, again, going back to the cavity wall insulation, if we install cavity wall insulation at your property, but the mechanical ventilation or the moisture control isn't taken into account, it can lead to condensation issues after the insulation is put in place. So the surveyor will be identifying that the bathrooms, the en-suites, the utility rooms, the kitchens all have appropriate control in terms of ventilation, and will be proposing to install those if they're needed, should the measure require it. They'll also be clarifying, as I mentioned, that the measure is suitable to insulate and providing the appropriate pre-survey documentation. So again, when the work is all finished, the certificates are given, it's all done with the correct documentation from a pre, mid and post installation. When the survey is completed and the thumbs up is given to go ahead and install the work, the nominated installer will contact you and arrange an installation date by one of the crews. The crew will use a specific app and login, which is in line with the Green Homes Grant, and the app is called Sightline, and it allows the administrators of the Green Homes Grant to ensure that the materials used are the correct materials, the time and labour is in conjunction with the original quotation, and the square meterage of the measure is also in line with what was originally quoted. Should there be any alteration, then that will affect the amount given at the end of the job, but that shouldn't affect the grant actually sort of being given to cover the cost. Once the installation is taking place, you will be encouraged to sign off the job as being installed, that you're happy with the work that's been done. You'll be also encouraged to go to the Green Homes Grants site and just to complete a declaration that the work is completed and that you've received all the correct certification and all the correct guarantees. The guarantees will come in the form of a 2-year Trustmark guarantee, and in the case of cavity wall loft insulation, you'll get a SEGA guarantee of 25 years or 2 years. And any other measures should be accompanied by the manufacturer warranty and the guarantee of the installer. As you go along your journey, there are a few things that you should never expect to see in terms of the red flags. You should never be asked for a deposit. So before the work is installed, no one should be coming to you and saying, we need a deposit because the amount is so high. Any payment shouldn't be done until after the installation has taken place. The voucher should come from the Green Homes Grant. So you shouldn't receive a voucher from the installer direct. So if an installer says, oh, we've done your desktop survey and we can instantly give you a voucher, that would be something to consider as not quite right, and perhaps maybe stopping with that installer there. As I mentioned, all measures must be registered on Trustmark. So if you're choosing an installer who claim they can install multiple measures, each measure should have a unique Trustmark number, which is available on the Trustmark website. So by simply searching the installer, it'll give you a list of their approved measures. You shouldn't see too much in the way of doorstop selling. So you shouldn't get people knocking on your door and offering to do the cavity wall, loft insulation, or any secondary measure just there and then. It should be a case of they can promote Green Homes Grant, but they shouldn't be able to say, oh, I've got a guy down the road who can come and insulate it for you this afternoon, and I've got a voucher ready for you to go. You shouldn't see that at all. Each quote you get, as I mentioned before, should come in different quote formats. So you shouldn't see one quote given that lists cavity wall, loft, and front door all on the same quote. If you do, then again, that won't go through the system, and no funding will be issued on that particular one. And finally, a survey should be done. So you can get installers that will say, yes, we'll come and do your loft insulation for you. And the first people that turn up are the installers. There should always be a pre-survey done as part of compliance and regulations set under PAS 2030-17, which your installers should be adhering to. So a survey must take place, a physical survey must take place before an installation is done. And that is pretty much it. I think I bored you long enough. But if you have any questions, as I say, I'm happy to answer them for you. No problem at all. Thank you.
So Steve, there's a number of questions in there, and as I've put in the chat, if we don't have a chance to answer all these questions now, we will put them into it. Can I ask what happens if a physical survey reveals extra costs or significant changes once the vouchers have been applied for?
No problem at all. So yes, the voucher code obviously will still stand, but the amount needs to change. So we will issue a new quotation based on the physical survey. That quotation can be sent back to the Green Homes Grant Services, who will then amend the value of the job. So sometimes that can increase the value, sometimes that can decrease the value. But yes, as per the physical survey, if there is a change, a significant one, then it will change. We'll send back a new quotation, which will give us a new figure.
Okay, that's great, thanks. And then one from Tim. What do I do if I haven't received my voucher yet?
The best thing to do is to chase it up with the Green Homes Grant Services. From what I understand, if you submit a quote, you should get a response from the Green Homes Grant automatically, and there will be a email address on there to contact them. 9 times out of 10, it's usually because there's something not necessarily problematic, but something missing from the quotation. And that could be the Trustmark number doesn't match with what they've got. And that's not to say there isn't the correct Trustmark number, it could just be wrong on that particular quotation. It could be there's a question mark over the labor hours or the amount of material. But by chasing them up, they should come back very quickly with a response. And if they don't, you can go back to the installer and maybe they'll have an answer for you.
Okay, there's a couple of questions there about finding local installers. And I suppose this is for both Tara and yourself, Steve. we know that it can be quite difficult to find local installers. But what do you suggest someone should do if they are trying to look for someone? I'll go to you first, Steve, and then I'll ask Tara.
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult. If you use the Trustmark website or the Simple Energy Advice website, it should give you a list of installers. The only other way I can recommend is obviously a quick Google search, and you'll get a list of installers in your area. But what you may find is, particularly within the last 6 months, the Green Homes Grant hasn't been a particularly favourable way of doing things, because it's in its infancy. It hasn't exactly been fluent or really well set out. Now we have seen the journey end to end from a quotation to not only the installation and the certificates being issued, but also payment being issued to the installer. It will be now more attractive for other installers, more local, to sign up to this particular scheme because, well, they know it works. So you may see more local installers sign up as the coming weeks and months go past.
Anything from you, Tara?
Yeah, I mean, I think asking around on social media works as well. That, you know, particularly as a lot of people are at home at the moment and not at work, I think people have got more time to answer questions on social media. That's often a good way for local companies to be. They'll be watching certain, you know, chat rooms, and they'll be answering questions themselves. I do know, I think it's Bridget Waltons that asked a question about doors. I do know there does seem to be a lack in the southwest of doors and window Trustmark registered companies. So I don't think there's an answer to that at the moment, apart from, like Steve says, we need to hope that more companies will become Trustmark registered as we go forward. I think we were on a call a couple of weeks ago, and I think there was maybe only one company that between us that we knew of that was Trustmark registered in the area. So it is a tough one.
Yeah, and I think the reality of it is there's a lot more people becoming aware, and there's a lot more installers realizing that it's a commercial opportunity for them, and as that happens, then they will come out of the woodwork, and we'll start getting more installers. But the important thing is that we, they're quality installers. There's one more question here. Can you apply for a secondary measure if you already have a defined primary measure installed but not grant funded? That's you, Steve.
No, so you have to have a primary measure installed under the Green Homes Grant in order to get the secondary measure. What's more, the value of the primary measure must exceed that of the secondary measure. So unfortunately, the answer, I'm afraid, is no. You do need to have a primary measure installed before a secondary measure can be applied for.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for those questions. If anyone does have any other questions or things, do email us and get in touch, and we'd be, happy to speak to you individually on any issue that you come up with. Yeah. Finally, because we're getting to the end of our allotted time, just to let you know that we will be doing this again, and with HETAS, and we will be talking about wood burning stoves, how to maintain a wood burning stove. We'll also be talking a little bit more about party wall insulation and probably underfloor insulation as well. So there's another webinar coming up on Thursday, the 18th of March, and we'd love to see you all again. Thank you very much for joining, and hope to see you again soon. Thank you.
Thanks very much, guys.
Thank you.